Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Stewart Stanley. I'm the Director of External Affairs for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Thank you so much for joining us for the 2020 Douglas County Mental Health Virtual Forum hosted by Douglas County Vice Chairman and Commissioner Kelly Robinson. We're so excited to have you here today. We're continuing our work that we've been doing in Douglas County, focusing on helping our citizens who have behavioral health issues in our county. This forum is just one of many forums we've had over the years. This is Commissioner Robinson's fifth forum, behavioral health, mental health forum that he's hosted during his tenure as a commissioner for Douglas County. So we're excited to have a great panel with us this evening to discuss behavioral health issues, which include mental health issues and substance abuse issues in Douglas County. At this time, we will hear from Vice Chairman Commissioner Kelly Robinson to give us some words of welcome and to share his vision for tonight's forum. Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you, Director Tiffany Stewart Stanley. Greetings, citizens. I am Kelly Robinson, and I'm humbled to be here tonight. As Director Tiffany Stewart Stanley stated, this has been a 5-year journey, and I'm going to start out with a story, and I think that's important. 5 years ago, I've got an inbox from a citizen on Facebook, and she pretty much said, Commissioner Robinson, you really need to consider mental health in Douglas County. To which I didn't reply. Didn't know her, real cautious about responding to people on Facebook, but nonetheless, she was persistent. A few weeks later, she called me back, hit me up again. I decided to read her what she wrote, and I decided to call her. And she began to share her story. She talked about how she watched and saw her mother commit suicide at 19. And she talked about how in that experience that for 2 years, her behavior went to the right. It wasn't in the light. And she talked about how she got in trouble and wound up being in state prison for 21 years. And she talked about how she didn't get the help that she needed. And had she got the help, she might have been not in the place that she was. So her story was so strong and so poignant, and it hit my spirit. And it made me back up and think about, like, okay, mental health is not just that person's issue or that person's issue. It's everywhere. It's not a partisan issue. It's not a race issue. It's not an American issue. Mental health is everyone's issue. It can be seen in your own household. It can be seen in your subdivision. It can be seen in your community. But with that said, I backed up and said, okay, but what will I do it? What would I do about it as a legislator? Again, I'm not obviously the top person here. And as a legislator, all I can do is advocate for what I think is important. Obviously, being the commissioner of District 2, that has a certain limitation. But this is something that I so believed in that I set out to try to find people to get behind this. And I began to reach out to Judge Bo McLean, who was very receptive, because at that time during 2015, that was when Governor Nathan Deal began to do his criminal justice reform out of Hall County with his son. And it began to take off. So the timing was perfect. And so here I am in Savannah, and I'm at a conference, and I'm going through a criminal justice reform class. And in that class is about 400 of fellow commissioners. And we're sitting there, and they're talking about criminal justice reform, and they're talking about how the state has gotten to a place where they can no longer build prisons. They've got to give alternative sentencing options. Now, this woman is in my spirit, in my heart, and I'm listening to this, and the timing was like, gosh, I think the time is now. So I came back immediately home. The very next month, I was in Sweetwater State Park, and I began to advocate for this with Roger Bruce's Catfish Rodeo, state rep. And it was one of those where I believe that this was so important that everybody needed to hear about this. So I set out to set up a panel discussion. This is back in 2015. I believe at this one, you had State Judge Fortner came by. I think he might have been a solicitor, not even a DA yet. Votes. I got 4 votes. I didn't just get 4 votes, I got 5 votes. So what I have to thank is the full Board of Commissioners, specifically the prior administration with Tom Worthman and Mike Mulcair. Obviously, without their support, this would not have gotten done as the chair and the vice chair. Madam Jones-Guider, thank you. Commissioner Mitchell, there's nothing I can do without you. But obviously, with the new administration, Madam Chair, thank you for allowing the administration to take this up. Because obviously, I know my lane is in District 2, but for this to be countywide, I could not ask for any other support. And Madam Carson, thank you for joining us and carrying this forward. So this is our 5th year. Again, hopefully this program, as an outcome, I set out 3 things. I wanted to focus on prevention. I wanted to focus on intervention. And for 5 years, we've been driving home awareness, and hopefully tonight it'll be a call to action. So I'm within my 5 minutes, which is normally beyond my normal 3 minutes. But nonetheless, I have not seen this trailer of this documentary, and I really believe it's going to be very good for us, and we're going to get into this panel. So without any ado, Madam Tiffany Stewart-Stanley, please take over. And citizens, again, I breathe your greetings, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
So what we will do is we will go ahead and start with our panelist intro. We will start with Dr. Aldwin Tart. We will give you, Dr. Tart, 1 minute to introduce yourself to the audience.
My name is Dr. Aldwin Tart. I am a Christian clinical psychologist. What that means that I am cross-trained as a minister as well as a clinical psychologist, helping you to apply application to the word. I specialize in helping families, marriages, and children to have better relationships. I'm a native of Atlanta, Morehouse grad, University of Michigan graduate as well, and I've been a psychologist for 20 years, and I'm glad to be here.
And next, we will hear from Morgan Cannon from the Douglas County School System.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Cannon. I'm a school psychologist with DCSS. I've actually been a school psychologist in Douglas County since, I think, 2012. I currently serve 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school. In a nutshell, school psychologists typically spend the majority of our time assessing students for special education services, but we also provide both individual and group counseling to students in need. We consult with school staff, and we ultimately strive to help each and every child be successful both academically, behaviorally, and socially. So that's basically in a nutshell, and I'm excited to be here tonight as well.
So at this time, we will ask State Representative Kimberly Alexander to join us as a panelist.
How you doing? Thank you for the intro. I'm the state representative for District 66. I have a portion of Paulding County and I also have Douglas County. I want to first thank Tiffany and Commissioner Robinson for putting this together. You guys have had it for 5 years and I participated probably on about 3 of them, so I appreciate you guys for that and for the invite. My background, I've been in the House of Representatives now this is my 4th term. And my background is in audit. I'm not a doctor, but my background is in audit and is in finance, is in operations. And I have quite a few bills that I've sponsored in the House. And so I'm just thankful to be here and I appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you.
Well, thank you again so much for being here. I go down to the Capitol for Douglas County and I see how hard you work for us every day. So thank you. So next, I will invite Dr. Carlo Musso of CEO Correct Health to come on and just give us a brief introduction of who he is and his background. And we welcome you as a panelist.
Good evening, everyone. Also, thank you, Vice Chairman Robinson, for the invitation. This is my first year to participate in the Mental Health Forum, and I appreciate that. Thanks to you, Tiffany, for reaching out to me this week. My background, I am an emergency physician. I was trained and worked in several metro Atlanta area emergency departments, mostly on the south side of Atlanta. And about 20 years ago, my local sheriff tapped me on the shoulder to help him manage some of the inmate healthcare problems he was having at his jail. And over the last 20 years, our company has grown to provide healthcare services to not only Douglas County, but many of the jails in Georgia and in the Southeast. That's my introduction, and we can get into more about what happens in the jail a little bit later.
Yes, thank you. In order to get the conversation started tonight, we are going to focus on the family. We have Dr. Alwyn Tart with us tonight, and as he's told you, he is a psychologist. You may have seen him on CNN, HLN, and on a lot of different channels and different media forums. So, Dr. Tart, if you will get ready, we're going to start with our questions for you. We know that right now a lot of families are going through a lot with COVID-19, being at home, being away from, their jobs and their friends and everything that they're used to doing. What are some easy steps that families can take right now to self-counsel?
All right, one, scheduling quality time with one another. While a lot of people are off work, there are a lot of people that are working more hours than ever. If you're in healthcare, if you're in mental health, if you're in essential services, you run your own business, you might be finding yourself working more hours than you did before. So scheduling quality time with one another. Two, make sure that you're saying positive things to one another. You'd be surprised how many times you can be in a family and not know what your worth is because you just are not you have not been trained to actually say positive things about one another. We call those affirmations. We call those, sharing fondness and admiration. Three, doing activities to support each family member during COVID-19. So that means that every member of the family should feel included. There are times in which my wife and I, my oldest daughter, have to do what our 4-year-old wants her to do so that she can feel special. And there are times in which they have to watch a certain movie I want and rotate. So it's important in families while we're spending this time sheltered in, and this should continue even afterwards, that we're doing and scheduling family versus allowing the world to kind of intrude on our family time. And I'll go into that a little bit more. Basically, what's happening is that before and even now, we have work, church, school activities, friends and family, video games, this phone intrude on quality time for families, where you can find families together actually all looking at their phone and not connecting. So my biggest advice is use this time while you are sheltered in or whatever your situation is to really strengthen your family bond by scheduling quality time, should be on the calendar, doing activities that support each family member, and saying positive things to one another to affirm one another. And the last thing, resolve conflict peacefully. The goal is to hear and feel the conflict versus persuading and argue. So make sure that you resolve conflict peacefully. We expect families to disagree. And there's a thing called necessary conflict. And sometimes you have to have conflict to make sure that you set your boundaries and that you're heard. The conflict is not the problem. It's making sure that you have a process in place in reserving and resolving that conflict peacefully. All right, you right now you're muted.
Sorry. So, what are some of the main things that you?
I was lip syncing though. I was reading. I got a gist. I know you said main call.
You can lip my lips. But what I want to know is what are some of the things right now, especially during COVID-19, that cause some mental illness within the different family dynamics?
Okay, I'll tell you the biggest one. The couple stress. All right, stress from changing dynamics, whether you're trying to figure out what to do with your job, how to pivot with your career when you're going back to work, what that means economically. So stress is up there. The second one is the co-occurring pandemic that no one's talking about, which is loneliness. Loneliness. All right, we're getting research coming in left and right and numbers coming in that people are reporting record highs in loneliness. The last numbers I saw, somewhere around 49% of single men, 46% of single women reporting spiked loneliness. But the numbers, even in relationships and families, are spiking because many of us know you can be in a relationship and are in a family and still feel alone. So it's important that you reach out, and this is really, really, really important. If you're an introvert and you've relied on going to the gym and you've relied on going to work for your connection, you've relied on going to church, You relied on social activity. Now all those things are gone. So now you actually have to be pro-social. You actually have to use social media, use your phone, use Microsoft Hangouts, use Zoom, use FaceTime, use WhatsApp to actually get on the phone and connect with people. And this is true not only for adults, but my wife and I had a serious conversation and actually got our primary care physician on the phone about when to return our 4-year-old back to school because she is it's a big age gap between our oldest and youngest, and she's lonely and missing her friends. We're actually more worried about her sadness, her anxiety. She's saying she doesn't have any friends. She doesn't understand why she can't go back to school. She sees other kids when we go to the walking trail. She tries to run to them. We grab her. And I know there are other families experiencing the same thing. So the main thing that we're looking at right now is stress because of the changes at work and being in the same house and having to work through all those different obstacles at the same time. Parents are having to work and child care. And can I preach for a minute? Teach because the teachers are just sending assignments, and now I'm having to be a 4-year-old teacher and teach an 8th grader math. It's very hard and work at the same time. And so a lot of couples and families are going through that. So make sure that you're taking time for yourself. You're talking about stress, making the necessary adjustments, and also making sure that for your young ones, as well as your teenagers, middle schoolers, you're talking to them about how to overcome loneliness by doing appropriate social distancing, riding bikes, getting on the phone, doing Zoom calls, getting them together. So I think that's probably the biggest cause, and families really need to be in tune with and talk to their teens and one another about how to deal with stress and prevent loneliness.
Yeah. So we'll go back to Morgan Cannon with the Douglas County School System. So, we all know, especially the work we do in Douglas County, that our youth and suicide is a big issue, not only in our community, but every community across the country. And since 2012, there have been on average 22.8 suicides per 100,000 people in the state of Georgia. And then right on par with the national average, it's 22.3 suicides per 100,000 people. And then 41 children committed suicide in the state of Georgia in 2018. So, Morgan, I think we can all agree that that is a big issue, and that's something that no community, and we definitely don't want that in Douglas County. So, what are some of the things that Georgians and just Douglas County citizens can do to help reduce that number?
Well, I think one of the most, if not the most important things that adults can do to reduce this number is to make sure that we all have a really good solid knowledge base about some of the possible or typical suicide warning signs or triggers in our youth that have been found in those people that have been successful in taking their own lives. So this is obviously not an extensive list, but some of the main ones I want to focus on are our children's tendencies to talk about, draw pictures, write stories about the wishes to harm themselves. Saying things like, "I just want to die. Everyone would be better off without me." So kind of those doom and gloom statements to be looking out for. Also be looking out for children that have a plan to hurt themselves and that actually have access to the means of executing that plan. So unlocked gun safes are a hazard. Lack of supervision at home for long periods of time. Unlocked parental medicine cabinets with prescription pills. Those are all dangers that we encounter. Another thing to keep look out for is students that give away their prized possessions to others unannounced. Dramatic personality and behavioral changes. A happy-go-lucky, vibrant fourth grader that all of a sudden just becomes violent and hostile and aggressive. Children can also isolate themselves from others, lose interest in activities that brought them happiness. And also we see a lot of declines in school performance in those kids that are highly depressed and suicidal. So I think just keeping that knowledge base in the back of our mind and just really looking out for those triggers and warning signs so we can ultimately get these children the help that they need before, something that terrible happens.
Yeah, and that's very important. So we all know that everybody is, on social media these days, and especially the children and youth in our community. What kind of factor does social media play and suicide in our youth. We know there's a lot of online bullying and things of that nature. So what factor is that playing right now in our community?
Oh, it's a huge factor. I believe it's one of the most important factors, especially for our young women. They tend to be more negatively impacted by the cyberbullying. Our young women also have, the societal pressures of having a certain body type, acting in certain ways. And when they don't really fit those molds, then, the cyberbullying starts. And, kids these days are constantly on their phones. They have all kinds of apps that I don't even know the names of all of them. Their whole lives are just being broadcasted, and they're under scrutiny constantly. There's also been an uptick in these really dark and gloomy websites and internet chat rooms that some of them even suggest to young children that they should commit suicide or hurt themselves. And there's just so much graphic and inappropriate content out there on the World Wide Web that we really just have to be mindful of what our children are, seeing on a daily basis.
Right. And so you've spoken about some of the things that we can do, but are there any other precautions that not only parents but aunts, grandparents, neighbors can just kind of take to help children who may be in trouble or in danger of committing suicide?
Most certainly. I think some of the other panelists commented on this, but I think one of the most important things that families can do is to make sure and maintain that connectedness with their children. Obviously, COVID-19 has made daily life a struggle for a lot of people, but we just need to make sure that we're checking in with our kids, ask them how they're feeling at school, their friends, their family, and also just be mindful of those risk factors of depression and anxiety. And suicide also, and just make sure to have that family time with each other and make sure that these kids are staying connected with their schools, their friends, and other family members. And I think fostering that openness with your parents is very important, and just teaching children that feelings are meant to be expressed, they're
Right.
suppressed. And also, this goes without saying, but monitor that social media and internet activity, monitor that inappropriate content. Get them outside. We all know that exercising and being in nature, increases endorphins and makes people happy. And obviously, if your child is having depression, anxiety, suicide, work to get them some outside help. And if financial and money issues, exist, reach out to your school counselors, school psychologists, school and they can connect you guys with all these wonderful community agencies that Douglas County has.
Okay. And just my last question is there a certain age range that we really need to hone in on and pay attention on when it comes to our juveniles and our children and youth in our community?
Definitely. The most prevalent age group, I believe, is the middle and high school students. However, more and more research and stuff is coming out that as 5 have thought about suicide, have tried to commit suicide. One of my first experiences with suicide was with a first grade boy, 6 years old, and he committed suicide. So while our middle and high school teenager kids, we got to really keep our eye on, it's trickling down into the younger kids as well.
Well, thank you, Morgan, for all those things we can do to prevent and help our youth in Douglas County. So next we'll move on to Representative Kimberly Alexander. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Representative Alexander has been a big part of fighting for mental health and behavioral health in our children in Douglas County, but also for all Georgia citizens. So one of the questions that I have, could you tell us a little bit about any of the initiatives or legislation that you've been a part of to help with behavioral health issues?
So I first started in 2016, and I wrote a study committee bill. It was HR 1093. And this was a study committee bill that looked at the initiatives, the reforms, public health, and safety concerning the mental health. And that passed out of the House in 2016, and I chaired that study committee. And out of the study committee came about 9 recommendations. The first recommendation was to create a commission on children's mental health. In 2017, Governor Deal created the Children's Mental Health Commission. As a result, the 2019 budget included a great deal of the items that came out of the Children's Mental Health Commission. And then in 2018, I also sponsored House Bill 659, which was a bill on medical, technical, and paramedics to observe and involuntary conduct evaluation and treatment of mental illness. And also in 2018, I sponsored House Bill 733, which was a bill to add more psychiatrists to current loan repayment and fellowship programs. As a result of that bill, what happened is that I had to have a lot of meetings with the Director of Community Workforce Development, Chairwoman of the Health and Human Services, and the Chairman of the Health Appropriations. As a result, the FY19 budget also included a line item of $1.9 million for medical doctors in the rural areas to include psychiatrists, since we have limited psychiatrists in the rural areas. Also in 2019, a bill that actually came from under the Douglas delegation was House Bill 441, and that was to create a treatment program within the juvenile court relating to the prevention and treatment of substance abuse.
Thank you. And that's a very extensive list of legislation and initiatives. So is there any legislation that we should be aware of that's pending right now during the 2019-2020 legislative session that pertains to mental health or behavioral health?
So that's quite a few. So I'll try to read off just a few of these. We passed one that was HB 514, and this was to create a Georgia Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission, similar to what we did with the criminal justice. So they had their first meeting in December 18, 2019. But that's what that commission is to try to create some great legislation on mental illness, similar to the criminal justice reform and what we did with that. During the 2020 session, there's quite a lot of bills, so I won't read off all of them, but I'll read off some of them. HB 760 was to relating to examination and treatment for mental illness. It authorizes peace officers to take a person to a physician or emergency receiving facility. And then there were quite a few bills on veteran suicide prevention, and there was one bill that was passed, and that was HB 842, and it prohibits providers and health insurers from discriminating against potential organ transplant recipients due solely to the physical or mental disability of the potential recipient. So that did pass out of the House.
Right.
Yes.
So is there anything that the current budget may have in store for mental health concentrated programs?
So what I did was I looked at the Georgia Budget Policy Institute, and I also looked at the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health over a 5-year span just to see what the decrease was as it relates to the budget. So I did it from 2016 to 2020, and it has increased. It was more of an increase in 2016 at 4.53%. When you look at the whole state budget and what is appropriated for behavior health and development disabilities. And in 2017, it was 4.35% of the state budget. Okay. And then in 2018, it was 4.39%. In 2019, it was 4.41%. In 2020, it was 4.47%. So it has increased throughout the years.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And I know when you go back on June 11th, you'll be fighting for mental health and all the citizens in Douglas County and Georgia. And we appreciate everything that you do. So thank you so much for being a panelist with us today.
Thank you.
All right. So next we will move on to Dr. Carlo Musso, the CEO of Correct Health. And his focus will be on our citizens who are incarcerated in our local jails who may have some mental health issues. And so, Dr. Musso, are you here and ready to begin your questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So, Dr. Musso, thank you again for being here. So we know that about 83% of our jail inmates with mental illness do not have access to mental health services and support. So that's a statistic that's widely known. In a mental health crisis, people are more likely to encounter a police than get medical attention. I think the LA County Jail is supposedly the biggest mental health facility in the country. So what are the services that are available for those who are in need of mental health treatment if they are in jail?
A good question. To give it some context, let's talk about mental health in general, and then how and how the numbers are skewed in the incarcerated population. In general, in my practice of emergency medicine prior to working in corrections, mental health comprised of about 10 to 15% of my caseload in a typical emergency department, whether it's Grady or Douglas General or whatnot. And in incarcerated individuals, it's well above 30, almost 40%. So you see how in correctional environment compared to, say, retail healthcare or healthcare available in the public, the numbers are skewed. Suicide is between number 10 and 11 as a cause of death to all Americans. But yet in a jail, suicide is the number one cause of death, comprising of over 30% of mortality in jails and prisons nationwide. So you can see that not only is our caseload higher in our incarcerated individuals, but the acuity is also higher, in particular issues revolving around suicidality.
Okay.
Why that is in part access to care and the closure of many of our state institutions that formerly housed the mental health patients, in part, as well as other contributing factors. And I won't get into that. We don't have time for it. Okay. But what are the services available currently in the Douglas County Jail? I think if I walk you through how someone is arrested and gets booked into the facility, it'll shed some light. But individuals who are under arrest who arrive at the jail to be booked in, no matter what their problem is, they're immediately triaged in our intake booking area, which is to say a nurse assesses them and screens them. They're getting vital signs, they're getting questions regarding their health care, their mental health care, have they had attempted suicide before, or are they under the care of any mental health professional in the community, in particular, are they taking any mental health medications? And depending on the answers to those questions, they are then referred to our mental health professionals. Mm-hmm. We have psychiatrists available to the facility, as well as counselors and social workers. And that triage list is then referred and generates our schedule, just like you would in any clinic situation. So okay. On average, we run about 40 to 50 patients per week in our counseling, and about a dozen or so patients are seen by our psychiatrists that are severely mentally ill and medicated.
Okay.
That's kind of roughly how the system works and the size and scope of our problem. And in addition to those patients being seen, we house them in some mental health observation if they're severely mentally ill. And also there's a very active suicide prevention program that we manage patients who have expressed a desire to hurt themselves and have attempted to hurt themselves in the past. Or we have a watch called Suicide Watch in our facility, where we make frequent rounds and 15-minute checks on those individuals to make sure they're doing well.
What constitutes, if someone comes in and they have psychiatric issues, what constitutes them? Is there a way that they could be moved to a psychiatric institution if they need that help?
In certain circumstances, well, first of all, we're providing the care there. We do have a psychiatrist and medical doctors who provide the care. And I didn't mention substance abuse earlier. I should have mentioned substance abuse. So if our caseload is about 30% on the mental health side, there's another 30% or 40% of individuals who have substance abuse problems, which is a mental health issue as well, at least in my opinion. And there's a lot of comorbidities and overlap in that group as well. So they are also treated. They undergo various withdrawal protocols to make sure that they don't get sick or hurt, or as a result of their withdrawal from their alcohol or drug. And then once they're over that withdrawal period, they're immediately referred to our mental health professionals for counseling. And in addition to that, the Sheriff's Office provides a myriad of 12-step program and other group therapy available to those individuals.
Okay.
So that, is it ideal to provide care inside the jail facility? I wouldn't say it's ideal, but it is. Our goal is to assess and stabilize these individuals and to treat when indicated in as much as it is possible. We do refer some to the state hospital. Ones that are court ordered for forensic mental health evaluation are automatically sent there for evaluation. And those individuals who are very challenged to manage in the jail facility, we attempt to transfer to a Georgia Regional.
Okay.
I tell you, those beds are becoming more and more difficult to find, and right now there's very little referrals due to the COVID pandemic, only because we're trying to protect the patients at Georgia Regional from our inmates and vice versa. So we're trying to minimize movement between mental health institutions and correctional institutions because that is a contributor to the spread of COVID. And so we're actually taking care of, we're even more aggressive than normal with regard to forced medications and other things that we would not typically do in a jail situation.
Okay. So the mental health patients and the COVID patients, they're being kept separate from the general population. If you have a mental health issue, or for example, let's just say even if you had a health issue like COVID-19, they're being kept separate from.
Absolutely. And if anybody knows, the jail is a fairly new building and was specifically constructed with, I guess, a future pandemic in mind, because we have the luxury in Douglas County to have a good space to quarantine and sequester individuals who are suspected or confirmed to be COVID positive, and other medical problems as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Musso. I really appreciate you giving us that insight onto what's going on in our local jails with our citizens who are most vulnerable, who have mental health and substance abuse issues. Thank you. So at this time, I will turn it over to Douglas County Vice Chairman Kelly Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Director. Again, hello, everybody. So I'm going to be quick, but first I want to thank this panel. This was good. This was some very good information, and I'm very pleased as the outcome. I think we accomplished all that we did. So for the sake of time, because you guys know me, I like to start and end on time. I'm just going to run through my thank yous by, I know Dr. Adjuwan Tark had to drop off, so I want to thank him for his emphasis on time. He was one of our original panelists, so I'm so grateful for his contribution and his willingness just to respond to a phone call and say, I'll be there, whatever you need, Commissioner Robinson. Next, Dr. Pamela Thompson. Thank you, madam. You've been so kind, and you were one of my original panelists as well, but there was something that it didn't come up this time, but I remember the last time you spoke. You said this to me. You said this to the panel. Everybody is not evil, right? So that means that there's something out there within every individual that just because something is off and it may not be the normal behavior that we expect, everything is not evil. So next, Dr. Cannon, thank you so much to you, Dr. Trent North, and the entire school board. We appreciate your contributions to our day's panel discussion. Making the turn to the interventionist. Thank you so much, Madam State Rep. Kimberly Alexander. Obviously, I intentionally delayed my commentary about your contributions to mental health because I didn't want to take any thunder from all that you did. But you are an ally for us. You're rock solid. You don't move. You don't bend. And we appreciate what you do at the state level, both with CSB and with what we do locally as it relates to ordinances. So your insight, your access to resources, Again, it's priceless. Thank you, Madam Rep. Is there anything that you would like to share in closing comments?
So, according to the Mental Health America of Georgia, there are more than 2 million Georgians living with mental illness. Georgia ranks 47th when it comes to access to mental health care resources and insurance. A recent poll by KFF Health Tracking Poll found that nearly half of U.S. adults say that the coronavirus has negatively affected their mental health. Those numbers are probably going to rise. We don't know that right now until maybe about 4 to 6 months down the line, but we see it with the domestic violence, some suicide. So I would encourage people, and I know the number was given out before, but I want to give it out again. The Georgia Crisis Access Line, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 800-715-4225. Please reach out if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Rep. And you bring up a good point. Again, they say that money and power amplifies what's inside of a person. Fear does as well. And we're going through unprecedented times. And you're right. And you bring up this whole point of where we are right now and everything that's going on out there. So I think the resources you just provided, that number, we'll make sure we make that available at the end of the program. But it's so key. So thank you for your insight and again, your leadership at our state delegation. I'm going to keep moving. Dr. Musso, thank you so much. Again, your first time on our panelists. People are always asking all of us on the commissioners, well, what do we do in the jail? You know, the jail is one of those constitutional officers' worlds. Obviously, we've got Sheriff Tim Pounds, who's responsible for that, and we rarely have insight. But there's always one to know, are they being cared for? So very good. Thank you, Dr. Musso. Again, this has been a 5-year journey. It's important to acknowledge that Douglas County, in light of the pandemic, this is our 150th year of celebration of our birthday. We were founded, 150 years ago. So think about it. We're on deck right now. So these contributing panelists, you guys are helping shape the next 150 years. It's something that was important to be marked. It's just not enough to talk about having mental health, but let's do something about it to maintain it and address the mental illness that are going on. Again, we can talk about health. We can talk about our physical health and our financial health and our spiritual health. But our mental health is something that, we're trying to stomp the stigma. We're beginning to make the change. We're beginning to acknowledge. But again, it's something that is going to require a long-term haul. So with that being said, we're going to close this out and run our video. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this 5th annual Mental Health Forum. Thank you and good night.
Douglas County is a diverse, vibrant suburban community of approximately 150,000 people. It's a collaborative community that enjoys coming together to work, live, and play. But just like every community in America, it faces its share of behavioral health issues. Elected officials play a major role in the fight against behavioral health issues in the community. Douglas County Commissioner Kelly Robinson has been one of the community leaders leading the charge against behavioral health issues in the Douglas County community.
Remember, the Board of Commissioners is a unique function. Think about Congress, think about the General Assembly. We're legislators. We're not the day-to-day, right? So anything dealing with public safety, anything dealing with hospitals, anything about delivery of services is handled by the executive branch. So as a Board of Commissioners, our job primarily is to appropriate, get behind and sponsor those things that we think the community needs. If there's something within the executive branch that we think that needs to be added to, we do that. I wanted to really understand how judicial worked, how citizens may have wound up in sort of our penal system. And I remember the Chief Judge responding to the questions like, okay, so, why do people get 20 years to life? What was happening with that? And he said, Commissioner Robinson, very simply, we didn't have alternative sentencing options. Why are we putting people inside the penal system versus inside an institutional hospital? And what we recognize at the state level is that they were no longer building what? Hospitals, right? So if you don't have hospitals or institutions that could, care for these people in a proper way, and all you had was one institution would put one size fits all, that became a fundamental issue for our society, and primarily within the county. And so thus, one of the drags that we typically had is that you have people who are incarcerated for no reason. They need medical treatment. They need mental treatment, not that type of treatment. So for me, it was important to sort of highlight that there is a difference. There are segments of the population within the penal system that can be addressed differently at a more affordable way. And I had this one workshop that talked about mental health, right? And I said, oh, that'd be a good class to take. So I'm in this class with probably about 300 of us just sitting around, continuing learning. And I remember the guest speaker from the state, and she was making the comments about how these new accountability courts are coming out. They were coming out of Hall County. There were what I want to call, there was everything dealing with perhaps veterans and DUI and drug and mental. And there was these prongs. And I'm listening intently like, okay, here's some alternative sentencing option. Okay. And somewhere along the way, the lady says, well, basically it became, we can't afford to have people in jail for 30 years and they come out and we still have to take care of them. And it was one of those like, did y'all hear what she just said? And it wasn't a moral issue, it was more of an economic issue. In other words, if you put people in a box, you don't really treat them well, they're in there perhaps for life, 30 years, they get out, and then you found yourself in a situation where the state, the local municipalities were still trying to care for them at a burden that, okay, how did that policy work out? So what you saw was I saw a statistic that showed from 1985 to 2015 how people were incarcerated. And they watched that 30-year policy run, and they realized that, oh God, economically, we cannot sustain this rate.
The Douglas County court system is instrumental in helping members of the Douglas County community with behavioral health issues. Let's learn more about some of the programs and services they provide.
I preside over the mental health court program here, which we refer to as Hope Court. And HOPE is an acronym for Helping Our Participants in the Cycle. We hope to help our participants in the cycle of not recognizing or not acknowledging that they have a mental or suffer from a mental health illness because there is so much stigma involved with having a mental health or dealing with mental health issues, and also helping them in the cycle of not taking their medication properly, helping them in the cycle of coming in and out of the criminal justice system because of issues that they might be suffering from, that they're self-medicating.
Behavioral health issues are rampant in our community, but Douglas County is not alone in that problem. Every year we incarcerate almost 2 million people in this country that have a serious mental illness. Largely those mental illnesses go undertreated while they're in custody, and people decompensate and destabilize while they're in custody. We have done things basically the same way in this country for about 200 years. We are very good at locking people up. We are not very good at solving problems. The accountability courts are a new way that we can approach behavioral health issues, and the Hope Court program is one of those initiatives. So the Hope Court is a life-saving courtroom. It's staffed by criminal justice professionals that are specially trained in behavioral health and addiction. So it's the first time that a participant might walk into a room and everyone in that room's sole purpose is to see their life get better. We're a multidisciplinary team. There are judges, there are prosecutors, there are defense attorneys, and for the first time in history, all three of those people are doing the same thing and pointed in the same direction. We add to that community supervision, probation and parole officers, treatment professionals, both in the substance abuse world and in the mental health, behavioral health world.
You have people coming out more in crisis if they don't get identified. If, they go in, they could be victimized because they're in crisis and they're not acting rationally. A lot of the times we have individuals that are identified and we recognize them, we could get them stable on their medication, but then when they come out, they kind of fall through the cracks, and that's what we try and prevent so that they can at least meet up with, and we have a specific officer that handles all the mental health clients, and that's been successful.
Juvenile program serves several different populations. We have a family treatment court, which is an accountability court for parents with substance use issues. We also serve delinquent youth and unruly youth, which is now considered CHINs. with all kinds of services, programs, assessments to figure out what the families need and how better to serve them.
My responsibilities is to deal with all of the kids who come into foster care for unfortunate reasons from 0 to 3 years old, meaning from birth until 3 years old. And what that involves is dealing with children who have been prenatally exposed to substance use while their mother was pregnant, dealing with kids who are in need of services for developmental needs, such as speech therapy, physical therapy, children who have behavior problems with regulating their emotions as well.
Douglas County also has community groups and nonprofits working together to help the community face behavioral health challenges.
The state of Georgia is very blessed to have one of the unique organizations that's called Family Connections. And Family Connections is an umbrella for the entire state. Every county has its own unique organization with its own unique name. And what we do is focus on the needs of our families, our young people, and the things that we have to deal with. In Douglas County, it's called CORE, and that stands for Communities Organizing Resources for Excellence. The purpose of CORE is to find out, where are we a healthy county? Where are the areas that we have needs? And this is where Family Connections comes in. They get all of the data, they let us know the different areas that we need to work on. What areas are we doing well in and need to continue with? So its purpose is really an overall value for our families.
And so if I'm experiencing a mental health concern, that's going to potentially impede my ability to perform those roles of being a mother. You know, I've done a lot of in-home therapy as well, working with children. I've done a lot of child therapy as well. And oftentimes when parents are unable to serve in that parental role, you know, usually there is a mental health concern as well as a substance use issue. What impact does that have on children? And so Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, they've done a study looking at how adversity experienced during childhood, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs for short, how does that impact, of course, their risk-taking behaviors? And of course, it's also related, when you have that adversity during childhood, how is that related to your risk-taking behaviors?
Fit for the Future is a community development group, and our objective is to actively engage the community on a daily basis. So we host a number of different community engagement activities, programs, and initiatives that work within the community to be able to bring people together. Our big focus is unity in our community. Yeah, what I've seen is that a lot of the young people in our community are using, especially with drug abuse and substance abuse, we're using those as coping mechanisms in order to deal with the stress and the pressures of their age group and the reality of the world that they live in. So I feel that it has negatively affected them because they aren't using holistic approaches to be able to deal with the mental health issues that we all deal with. I think that mental health is something that every single person deals with, but the way that we handle it, I feel that that's the issue, and that's where substance abuse comes in.
The Douglas County Community Services Board envisions and works to provide every Douglas County citizen with access to support and services that can assist with coping with behavioral health issues.
The Douglas County Community Services Board is what's known here in Georgia as a Tier 1 safety net provider. We provide all behavioral health core services, both mental health, outpatient, substance abuse courses, ASAM courses, as well as stable residential housing for individuals with a mental health diagnosis. The National Council on Behavioral Health states that any given community, about 14% of that population will suffer from serious or persistent mental health illness within a given year. On average right now, Douglas County Community Services Board services about 5,000 of our citizens annually. Douglas County Community Services Board, we provide services such as individual therapy, group therapies, family counseling, medication assistance for individuals who can't afford their prescriptions, case management, addictive disease support. We help individuals get phones, identification cards, and we also do diagnostics.
Now let's hear some behavioral health success stories in Douglas County.
We've had about 8 individuals that have graduated from the program, and both male and female graduates. And I'm most proud of being able to get to know the participants on another level as a judge. Normally I don't get to talk to individuals that come before me, find out about their family lives, and really delve into who they are as a person. And so we have stories about individuals who are musicians and artists and poets. And I'm most proud of our graduates, but I'm also most proud of seeing them discover themselves.
CORE has been blessed the last 2 years. Our Board of Commissioners has given us funds where we've been able to actually help some individual families that would not have had the money in order to get the help they needed, but also to set up education, and not only for the public, but for our professionals. So putting funds into it, it affects every part of our community.
I had a student who started with me when he was 7 years old, and he was dealt with a lot of mental health issues, had lost his mother early, and also lost his grandmother early. Unfortunately, was actually there when they were murdered, unfortunately. And so he had to deal with that. And so, of course, as a 7-year-old or as a 5-year-old dealing with that, it causes for a lot of mental health issues. But he got into our program at the age of 7, and he was adopted into a foster home at the age of 7. And when he started our program, he was very ballistic to the point where you couldn't touch his shoulders, you couldn't really touch him because he just had PTSD and different things like that. But now this young man is actually a star student at Chapel Hill Middle School. He just made the 7th grade basketball team. He has all A's and B's, and he's doing phenomenal now.
I recently heard from someone who was on my caseload as a teenager several years ago, reached out to me through Facebook to let me know that he was doing well. He's a father, has children now. Just kind of letting me know how all of that affected him as a teenager in a positive way.
We had an individual that we were servicing that actually was experiencing homelessness. His backstory is that his actual wife and daughter died in a vehicle accident, and he had no will to go forward anymore. So he basically lost his house, lost his job. He came here, started getting active treatment and help, started working directly with some of our supportive employment coaches. And so now we'll tell you that he's a very prominent lawyer in Metro Atlanta today.
Thank you for watching. We hope that this was informative and that it inspired hope that Douglas County is actively working together to address behavioral health concerns in our community.